Okay, everybody. This week we're going to talk about the art of penciling and the difference between pencils, finished pencils, and thumbnails. Now, as you can see here, I've got a thumbnail page opened. Okay, now this is not the one that I'm currently working on, which is the sequel to this story, but one that is completed. Um, Now, as you can see here, this thumbnail page is pretty rough. You can see up above, I'm using the template, so I've got the title of the story, Arns of the Well of the Warlock, the issue number, okay. That says Brain Freeze because that was the name of the anthology that was going to be in, and then of course page one, all right. And that information up at the top is uh, that is for your own clarity and purpose, but also for any publisher you might be sending this work to. Some publishers like to see thumbnails. I think I mentioned that in a previous video. Okay, but what they're really interested in is what you can do with finished pencils. Okay, so I've got just about everything dealing with the story open at this point, and I'm in Photoshop, but I'm just using Photoshop as a vehicle to better show the work. It allows me to zoom in better and all of that. Okay, so this is the thumbnail page, and you can see I've sketched in very roughly the you know, an equivalent of the logo and what I thought maybe the title should look like, and then of course the figures in the foreground, excuse me, the well in the foreground, figures in the background, and so on and so forth. So you can see I've kind of thought it through early on, right? Now let's take a look at the penciled page. All right, this is the finished pencil page. Notice that at the top, again, much like the thumbnail pages, that there is room for info. There is the story name, which is Arnza, but I shorten it to WOTW, well, the Warlock and Brain Freeze. Page one, and then, but there's also a spot for date and where you can sign it. Okay, now these pencils are done on Canson art boards. Okay, they are blue lined and they're blue lined and ready to go. You know, non-reproducing blue line. You'll also notice that uh, in this video, though, I've also set up some guidelines in Photoshop. Now, the reason I did that was to allow me to, you know, basically ink better. Okay. When you've got the guidelines in there, it's easier to pop panel boxes in there when you're inking, and then go from there. So you don't have to do that necessarily, these blue guidelines, but I find them to be quite handy. All right, now let's take a closer look at the artwork itself. Now, going back to this, you can see I've got a rough idea of what I wanted the thing to look like, but in the pencils, I've done a lot more detail work. Okay, so even the smaller figures, let's zoom in here, if Photoshop will let me. There we go. I'm hoping it doesn't zoom in super far like it's been doing lately. I've been getting a little glitchy. You can see here that the figures are fairly well rendered. I've put in more thought about where the light source would be coming from. Okay, in this case, I've got the light source coming from the right, so it's casting shadows this way, and the shading on the clothing, the drapery, and all that, and even the well itself kind of reflects that. Okay, even the mountains back here, there is light side, shadow side. You know, on the figures, light side, shadow side, light side, shadow side. Going back to your basic drawing one stuff. Okay, now scrolling down here. Okay, you notice again more detail in the thumbnail. You know, these figures here are just barely rendered. Okay, it's just kind of a really, well, there we go. I told you it would probably zoom in way too far. My Photoshop has been kind of glitchy in doing that lately. Okay. You can see that these figures are just barely rendered. There's just enough there so I can tell, okay, this guy is looking down into the well, and so is this guy, but he's got his grappling hook, and this guy's in the background. very rough, very sketchy. I mean, look at that. The arm's not even complete. Okay. Here, yeah, the pose is slightly different. Okay. And that's just because, I got to try and make it more, I don't want to say realistic, but better rendered. Okay. There's, you can see lines of shadow, uh, muscle, okay, a little bit of shine on metallic, gauntlets and things like that. More detail to the grappling hook and all that. And another thing too that I put in here that might not be that obvious is I've really taken the time to think about perspective, okay, and where the figures are in relation to the background and the foreground, making sure that they are the correct height in relation to one another, and so on and so forth. Now, on this last panel here, you'll see that there is a big change. In the original, this character here, this hermit character or wizard, whatever he is, um, he's facing another direction. And it was just a aesthetic choice that I decided that, nah, he needs to be thinking more, uh, thoughtfully there, not just, waving his hand like he was here, but actually like, you know, scratching his chin and looking a little, like he's thinking about something. Okay, so that's the first page. All right, let's here's Control 0, zoom out. And oh, as you can see here too, I've also put in a placeholder for the title and the logo. Okay. Now this Well the Warlock was not what I ended up doing. That's not the one that I ended up using in the final version. I wound up typesetting another version of the name The Well the Warlock that I thought I worked better. The original idea here was to have it look like vapor coming out of the hole or something like that. Uh, or maybe use the scroll idea that I had on the original, but I decided not to go with that. I wanted something different. It's neither here nor there, but anyway. So let's look at page 2. Page 2. Come on, Photoshop. Okay. Page 2, we have a scene change. Okay, and we've got a big scene of a throne room. Okay, and that is the where King Urf is hanging out. A little bit of discussion here, and then of course, hey, you're going on this adventure too. And then it cuts back to the guys climbing into the hole, making progress through the cave, and then seeing something that surprises them. Cliffhanger thing from page to page. So let's take a look at page 2 of the pencils. Anytime. There we go. All right. Now, as you can see here, there's again some pretty significant changes. All right. In the throne room, I decided to move the characters entirely and have King Urf and his wife sort of sitting back, on an actual throne, throwing some large pillars there, and then you see the servant running in with news of, girl being abducted by a skeletal warlock character. Okay, and again, more detail here. We've got light side, shadow side, light side, shadow side. I wanted the throne room to seem large and sort of dark, cavern-like. My idea is that it'd be, lit by torches. We're talking the ancient world here, and the rest of the panels in that scene kind of reflect that as well. You've got very dramatic lighting going on. Okay, you see here, it's rather than a light source that is high up, okay, like in the previous page where it's sunlight that's beating down on them. The light source here is lower. Okay, so it's casting the shadows in a different way. It makes it a little bit more dramatic. I mean, if you've ever held a flashlight under your chin to tell a ghost story when camping, it's that kind of a thing. Okay. So then we see down here, the king is like saying, "Okay, you're the guy. You're going on this adventure." Now, again, there's another big change right here. In the initial planning, I'd gone with oh a shot where the characters are only about waist up or so. Okay. Now here I decided that, I really need to pull back so you can see the entire cavern that they're climbing down into. So, pulled back a little bit, you can see more of the stalactites and the well and all of that. And you can see here in the little sketch lines around here, you can see where I've drawn in, even though you're not going to see it in the final piece, I've drawn in some of the block going around there, and that's to make sure that the blocks that you do see are right. They're correct, okay? And that's some of the stuff that you have to do when you're doing your finished pencils. You have to actually figure out, okay, even if nobody's going to see this, the part that they're going to see has got to be right. So, you figure it out, you go that route. And you also see too that in this, we've got a couple of light sources. We've got a light source coming from above, but then also a light source from a torch. Okay, so light source coming this way, but then most of the light on the character of Dex is coming from his torch. Okay, and also the rubble around here reflects that. Okay, this in this story, the this well, as it's called, is not really a well at all. It is the topmost part of a domed, uh, you know, temple, from times, before the flood, whatever. All right, and so as you can see here, they sort of are progressing along. Again, a change from the thumbnails, where it was a very narrow panel, to one that is the same width as the other two on either side. And there we also see um, the characters looking surprised as they're seeing something. Now, originally in the thumbnails, this was brick through here. I decided, no, that'd be, let's just make that more cavern-like, with time. You've got, things that were architectural being covered in, dirt and rock and all of that. Okay, with erosion and all that sort of thing. And again, see, notice here that the lighting is coming from primarily the torch right here, but there's also some light coming from the scene that they're looking into. So we've got a shadow core right here across these pillars. Okay, so again, you want to make sure that you have everything sort of figured out and lighted and lit correctly. Okay, now let's take a look at page 3. Again, the differences. All right, page 3, we've got the scene that they're looking in on. So it's a reversal here. We've got Dex and Arnza, the girl who's been taken captive, and of course she's chained. And here's the bad guy here. And then we've got a panel here where the bad guy is kind of gloating, whatever, and then Dex taking the lead there. And I've sort of obscured the panel border here and have the characters sort of overlapping it. And that's something that we do sometimes to make things seem more dramatic. Now let's take a quick look at the actual pencil pages and any difference there might be. Now, as you can see, they're pretty similar. Okay, this wasn't a one where there were a lot of changes. Now, I did pull back a little bit. We use a lot of terms in comics that are borrowed from movies. Pulling back is a, camera term. As you can see here, it was just basically head and shoulders there. But I wanted to have, whoops, wrong one. Wanted to have more of the figures showing. Okay, so I pulled back a little bit so we could see more. All right, and I also moved these characters here back a little bit. Okay, and I also decided to get rid of the I had drawn a bit more of an ornate kind of throne there that, to be honest, I didn't want to bother with because that seemed seemed kind of predictable. A throne with some sort of like Cthulhu looking thing on it. It's kind of a cliche. So I just decided to go with something that was um, a little more, I guess, ancient looking. The further you go back in time, the less ornate pillars and thrones are. Okay, so I was thinking more along the lines of that sort of monumental architecture that was from way back when, 5,000, 10,000 years ago, that they're finding these days, Puma Punku and places like that. Okay, so let's take a closer look here. You can see again, what's lighting the scene here isn't so much the torch anymore, but a standing torch um, in the room. And again, the lighting on the figures reflects that. And the same is true with the pillars. Okay, shadow core, cast shadows, and then shadow being cast on this rock wall back here. All right. And again, the lighting on the figures still down here reflect that. Okay. A lot more detail of the face here. Um, he's sort of grabbing her by the face like your grandma will do when she's going to give you a kiss and stuff when you're little. Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah. And a lot more detail as far as like the this skeletal figure, this living dead warlock guy. Um, if you've taken my Art 105 class, you know that we draw skulls, and I got out my old skull and made sure this was right. Okay, and then of course, Dex here making the charge. He's looking a little more fierce here, but I kept the overlap. With the elbow and with Arns's head. Okay, Arns is like crouching down behind him. He's got the torch now. It's not obliterating the border as much as the thumbnails. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at page 4. All right, page 4 is basically a big action page. All right, so we've got the warlock zapping Dex with some sort of magic or whatever, and then him recovering there. Arns is kind of helping him up. Arns is like telling him, "Hey, man, we need to rethink this." And Dex is like, being his usual bullheaded self. I imagine him being like that usually. This is the first Arns' story that I ever completed, but it's all in my head. Okay. And there he is leaping again toward the bad guy. All right, let's take a look at page 4, the finished version. Okay, so again, it's a case of lighting, dramatic lighting, making things look different. Now, in this case, though, we've got new lighting that is actually coming from the little magic thing that is zapping Dex. So notice that the shadow core along this pillar is being disrupted, if you will, and there's lighting. There's a little bit of rim lighting over here from the torch, but most of the light source is coming from this magic stuff. It's got to be like lightning or something. And of course, the lighting on Dex reflects that as well. Okay, again, over here, the next panel, it's pretty much exactly what I had in this version. Okay, just more detail added. Okay, and again, lighting, that kind of thing added. So you've got cast shadows and all of that, right? Not quite as dramatic a lighting as before. Okay, then we've got our close up here where try to get very expressive. Now with this, it's just kind of I didn't really think about what the expressions ought to be. I just kind of drew in the figures. He just, Dex looking just annoyed. In this, I wanted to make him look really mad, really upset, like, enraged almost, and the next panel reflects that, where so he's actually speaking here, but it's through gritted teeth. So, again, too, when you're drawing your figures, you want to make them be as expressive as possible. These characters are, this is like silent movies. They're speaking with their hands and their expressions. Okay. Now, I tend to pay a lot of attention to, especially in like the mouth area when I'm drawing characters, what the lips are doing. Okay. So notice here that, yeah, he's got gritted teeth, but his lips are kind of wrapped around those teeth in a snarl. Okay. And then here we go. He's leaping back at the bad guy. A slight change here. Here you see more of the body. I thought, I don't know, when I was sketching it out, it just looked better having him a little bit lower than that. You can see there, kind of, again, the light source is back to that torch. So again, the lighting reflects that. Light side on the right, shadow side on the left. Okay, that's page 4. Thank goodness it's only a 6-page story. Let's see, page 5. Okay, and here we've got, we're getting toward the end. This time, instead of getting zapped, the Warlock just grabs Dex by the throat and just hurls him away, sort of like, just tired of your stuff. And then he turns toward Arnza. Okay, and then Arnza just uses his weapon, which is his brain, and starts talking to the guy. Okay, that's kind of the point of the story. All right, so let's take a look at the finished version. This is page 5. And again, lighting is everything. Now, you can see here, this is something of a convention in American comics. We've got little lines here pointing toward the character. Okay, this essentially denotes surprise. Something happening suddenly, and in this case, Dex coming to a complete halt. Now you've noticed too that I've taken the time to actually make sure that the way the characters are overlapping is correct. See, now you don't really see very much of the Warlock's forearm at all. Okay, but it's inferred that it's there. Okay, I was kind of figuring out there, but when you do the finished pencils, you got to make sure it's correct. In this case, what I did is I took a couple of little mannequins, little wooden mannequins, and kind of set them up to make sure that the the arm length and things like that would be correct. All right, and of course we've got the skulls can't furrow brows, but this is a comic book, so I've got a very expressive skeleton here. Okay, so if he furrows his brow, yeah, I know that's not, physically possible, but there you go. And there he's being flung away, a little more detail on the hand and all that kind of stuff. And then he turns toward Arnza. Okay, again, shadow being cast over on the left. More detail here on the face. Okay, a lot more detail. And again, we've got a very expressive skeleton face here. You can see he's got one brow up, one brow down, like, oh, never thought of that sort of thing. All right, again, which is, totally impossible. Let's go to thumbnail page 6. Okay, now in this page, I decided to use a little bit of, weirdly shaped panels. Okay, you can see here that this panel slopes down on a big incline. Okay, now the reason I did that was because I wanted to have a longer panel here where the character, well, he starts turning into dust. Basically, what happens in the story is Arnza starts asking him how his whole deal works. You know, he says to him, "Well, hey, you're speaking to me, but I don't see a tongue. You can see me, but you don't have any eyes." And then he's like, and so he's listing off all these things, and he's like, "I don't even see that much connective tissue. So how are you even moving about?" And of course, the idea is the guy, his magic sort of stops when he starts thinking about it, and he, starts crumbling into dust, and there you go. There's your little ending. So in this panel, it needed to be a longer panel because I wanted to show more detail of him just sort of collapsing in a heap. It actually worked all right because in this panel here, I have, Arnza checking on Dex, making sure he's okay. The girl, in the foreground, middle ground actually, being a little surprised by what happened, well, shocked actually. And then the immediate foreground, what's left of the warlock. Okay. You notice here too that I was thinking ahead. That's like, okay, in this last panel here, after they free the girl and get ready to go, there's not going to be a border. All right, so I'm thinking about that in the in advance. That okay, the end of the story, no borders. You can say the end, that sort of thing. So let's take a look at the finished page. All right, so again, same kind of thing. Stuck with the angled panel. Okay, there might have been a little bit of change in the position there. Okay, a little bit zoomed in a little bit further on where the figures are. Okay, and that's just a matter of making sure it was correct. To be honest, in the thumbnails, this female character here and the background characters were a little too close to being the same size, so she'd be in the foreground, but in the middle ground, but the immediate middle ground, right by Arnza. Okay, and you can see here too the more detailed thing that's going on. First, his jaw falls off and his fingers are falling apart, and then the rest of him goes. Okay, there's different bones and stuff and all that. And then here's let's zoom in a little closer. Now, I'm still aware of the lighting and the light side and the shadow side, but in these last little panels here, the lighting's not as dramatic. Okay, there's not the heavy shadows like as we had before, and that's again a conscious decision. Okay, again, here he's freeing the girl, and then as you can see here, no panel right there. Now the size of the characters, Arnza is like pretty. He's a bit into the foreground, so he's shorter, but the height is roughly correct. Again, it's just a matter of perspective. When I was drawing this out, I actually had a perspective line going this way and one going this way. If Arnza were the same height as Dex, he would have been like this tall up here, right about where this this area is, right about here. Okay, so since he's shorter, his height is right about there. Okay, actually did think it through. And in the finished version with the lettering and all that, which I will probably show you guys later, it does say the end right here. Right after he has his little comment about, logic and magic don't mix. That was something that was said at the beginning of the story, so it's a little wraparound there. All right. Okay, so that is a walkthrough from thumbnails to pencils, and we're about the half an hour mark, so I think that's about right. Okay. Now, I look forward to seeing your pencils in the coming weeks. Okay. Take your time with this stuff. We want to get through this, but take the time to actually figure out your lighting, figure out your perspective, and try and make it look good. Okay. Talk to you guys later.